No place like home. Channel 2's Ron Saylor faced that prospect along with Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young. Ron is standing by live right now at the Atlanta Union Mission with a report on what happens when the doors are closed. Ron?
Jerry, there are only about 8,000 men, women, and children who live on the streets of Atlanta. But there are only about 24 shelters such as this one, the Atlanta Union Mission, with about 2,000 or 3,000 beds around the city, depending on who you happen to talk to. That leaves an estimated 4, 5, or even 6,000 people on the streets of Atlanta each night to fend for themselves. I assumed from the start of this project that two more, those two being Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young and myself, would hardly make a noticeable difference, and we didn't. But we noticed some things. We got a more intimate view of the demographics of the homeless, who they are, their disabilities, what has happened, and the debate in which they stand at the center.
Get up in the morning, if you ain't got 50 cents in your pocket and you get up in the morning, where can you go?
The same people who supposedly have no money, I find these people drunk who have somehow got money for liquor.
But they are frowned upon because when they come into the situation, people look at them as if though they're some beast coming out of the woods or something. They're not.
The homeless are not lazy people. They're people who are homeless and who want to work and who can work. And if there were jobs available and housing available, I would say 60% of our homeless population could be eliminated.
And so the debate goes, what to do and think and feel about the homeless who make the streets their home. For years, Andy Young has been a part of that debate, but this night we see together homelessness from a more intimate view, looking like some homeless look, walking and wondering where most go. First, a shelter, but it is already full.
I was a little nervous about people recognizing me, and once I realized that they didn't know who I was, then I relaxed and got in the conversation. Again, I hadn't had much to eat, and that bologna sandwich was good.
So with a sandwich and a few dollars between us, we walk and we walk. Nobody noticed us. Nobody really looked at us. People don't look at the homeless to see if theirs is a face they recognize. To be homeless is to wear a cloak of anonymity. Not many people will ask you your name. Not many people will care.
Where are you going to sleep tonight?
Well, I'll probably stay up.
Walk all night?
Well, I don't know. If I had the finances, I would have stayed down there in the, maybe in something like the Pancake House and drink coffee or something like that.
You may have noticed James Searcy at the Pancake House or some other all-night establishment. Atlanta may have 24 night shelters of varying size and nature, but many of the city's estimated 8,000 homeless are rarely fortunate enough to get a bed.
Name's Alexander. Willie Jones Barnes.
If your name is not called before all the beds and floor space are taken up, you walk, or you find a hole, no matter how safe or sanitary, and you crawl in. Some just wait outside shelter doors. And some come here to Grady Hospital, which is not far from downtown Atlanta. If it's a busy night and security is a little lax, they get a place to sleep, or if not sleep, at least to rest. If not, they get a quick invitation to get back onto the streets of Atlanta. And on the streets of Atlanta, you get what you find. It isn't always pleasant. 17-year-old Kenny Brown and his 57-year-old father. They have lived in Atlanta for over a year, mostly under bridges. This alley is their home tonight. The refuse from this dumpster, their dinner.
We have been eating right there at the back there in the garbage can. We have been eating there, and somebody stole our blankets and all of our clothes, so we've been just snuggling up to each other.
Now it's 2:45 in the morning. The mayor and I find a place to sleep in the city shelter. But there will be no good night's rest because first, there is a fear that has to be overcome.
I really was afraid of the shelter. I didn't want to go to the shelter. We finally got there. I was so tired, I got my pad and I hit the floor and I was asleep right away.
But you don't sleep long or well on a shelter floor. The bathroom door slams incessantly throughout the night, and there is more.
And what was more disturbing was the coughing and the realization that many of these men had been exposed to the elements and that the level of respiratory illness was probably pretty high.
I wondered about the mayor's thoughts as he lay on this gymnasium floor. Was he formulating some new public policy to help these men help themselves? No. Andy Young was thinking about a one-time classmate who, like himself, had been suspended from school for a day.
And he had been in and out of jail and had been living in the streets and was a heroin addict. And I went back to school the next day because my parents gave me my whipping and took me back. His mother was working as a maid for $1 a day, and she couldn't take a day off because she needed every dollar to take care of her family. And he never got back in school from 3rd grade.
Now it's 5:05, nearly 24 hours since we first hit the streets. Not nearly long enough to know the hurts and hopes of the homeless, just long enough to become acquainted with their plight.
We were by here about 6-7 hours ago, and he was sound asleep. He got a better night's sleep than we did.
Just long enough to know that theirs is an experience that can never be acted out.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know about you, but I'm cold. You and I have the option now to go home.
Yeah.
Can you conceive of the reality of not having that option?
No, that's a rough option, and I think that's the thing that makes this acceptable to us. That whenever we really, run out, we have some place to go. But if I had no place to go, and it could be that way. There, but for the grace of God, go I.
Andy Young spent more than 24 hours on the streets of Atlanta with me. I'm indebted to him. Together, we discovered some elements about homelessness in Atlanta that may not at all be surprising. But the following day, I encountered a surprise, and I'll tell you about that in my report tomorrow. But as for tonight, I've been flooded with phone calls from a great many of you who want to help. Here's a telephone number that you can call. The telephone number is 872-3603. That's 872-3603. Those good people from the Homeless Task Force are going to be there until 9 o'clock tonight. I hope you'll give them a call. Monica, Terry?
Ron Saylor, it's supposed to get down to 17 degrees tonight. Are there going to be enough beds for the homeless tonight?
We're always told that there is always at least a bed somewhere in the city of Atlanta. The difficulty is finding that bed and being able to get to it. When Andy Young and I were stranded outside Central Presbyterian Church, we waited for the City of Atlanta shuttle for over an hour and a half. That never came. That's the difficulty.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron Saylor, and we'll look for the second part of Ron's special assignment tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. The Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office today revealed some rather frightening new figures on deaths of homeless people here in Atlanta. A preliminary report says that 40 people, most of them men, have died on Atlanta streets in the past 12 months.
Tonight in our special assignment, No Place Like Home, Ron Saylor reports those deaths and the victims they claimed have gone largely unreported and mostly unnoticed. Ron is standing by live at the St. Anthony Shelter for Homeless Men. Ron.
Monica, this report is actually a poorly kept secret. Most of the advocates for the homeless have long felt that these deaths were on the increase. But Dr. Randy Hansley, the Fulton County Medical Examiner, spent nearly a year documenting these deaths, trying to show cause and effect. What he found was two principal lethal killers, cold nights like tonight and a history of neglect. Why aren't these deaths front page news? Well, because the homeless, both in life and death, have very few friends, have this history of self-neglect, and nobody knows their names.
What we do when we talk about the homeless is they become an it. they become a problem. These are people.
Robert Watson, bed 7.
And I've literally seen people here who, 1 month have had a great job, the next month they have lost their job and have been broke.
You President Slim? Good man. Have a good night, sir.
There is a relationship among the homeless. Call it kindred. You see it in the shelters. This night, when the shelters were all closed, I saw it on the streets.
Okay. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I'll be down here.
Okay.
Thursday.
Okay.
I'll come if I wait here.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, I appreciate it.
You don't find many isms among the homeless. Racism, sexism, classism. No. For me, at least, that was a startling discovery, but not nearly as startling as another discovery the following morning. The homeless aren't always people you don't know.
When we were out here playing, did you have any idea we was going to end up like this?
No. The way I looked at it, that, you know, everything was going to be a success. Matter of fact, when we was playing together, I had a 7-5 record.
His name is Doc. In the late 1960s, he was one of the great athletes in the Atlanta school system. He was a track and basketball all-star. He was captain of the football team. He was my classmate. He was a friend.
There was a time, wasn't nobody in the city that hardly know me or knew my number anyway.
And it has all changed after 4 years of living on the streets. The hands are still quick, but the speed and agility and the friends and home are all gone. Doc is homeless like 8,000 other people in Atlanta.
And every now and then we might be sitting in the bar drinking a beer, and the guy say, "Hey man, I always thought you were gonna make pro," you know.
I thought Doc might have made the pros. His college scholarship offers came from around the nation. But Doc got tackled by a misdemeanor violation of the law. He never got back up.
You know, it's a thing when you do what you want to do, not doing what you have to do. And that's what I fell between, you know. I didn't do what I had to do. I did what I wanted to do. And, you know, that's it. You know, I figured that I was going to be playing professional football one day, and that was my goal.
Goals. Most of the homeless have them, though many may seem like faraway, wild-eyed dreams.
Yeah, I'm planning on leaving one day. You know, I've been here going on 2 years.
His name is John Wilcox. His goal is to just get out. Emmanuel DuBose wants out as well.
Sure. I wish to start teaching again, and where I majored in political science and history, where I've been all over the world studying history as far as Africa is concerned. I studied at the oldest university on the face of the earth, the University of Timbuktu in Malay, West Africa. And the second oldest university, University of Timbuktu. I studied there for 2.5 years as far as history and political science is concerned. I come back to the United States, and just when all my troubles began.
Bill Satterwhite of the Atlanta Union Mission.
Family, they're good people, basically good people, but they're people with a problem. It could be a problem of alcohol, it might be a mental illness, it could be any type of a problem. And but for the grace of God, any one of us could have that same problem.
I've seen a whole lot of talent in a lot of those guys. And right now, majority of those guys are about my best friends.
And they're not just worthless people?
No.
To be thrown away somewhere?
No way. Because you got painters, carpenters. I have even ran across a couple professors in there. And
like the overwhelming number of people who live in and out of Atlanta shelters, Doc wants a job. In this case, any job. Doc is my friend. You help friends. So Doc is going to work for a local trucking company. He'll make $8 an hour with a chance to move up. But hiring Doc still leaves 7,999 people unemployed.
The outside world don't trust them, and I don't blame them for not trusting the outside world, because these people do not want to be pushed into a dog situation where they do not belong. The only thing they want is work. 90% of these guys want to work. but the business community and the employment community will not hire them because of their status here.
To be invisible will be my claim to fame. A man with no name. That way I won't have to feel the pain.
The homeless, the jobless. The two terms are nearly interchangeable. It is the end of my second day on the streets, but there is another discovery. The homeless have to find jobs before finding homes. But how? What phone number do you leave for an employee to call back? What names do you give for two professional and a personal reference? Who will excuse your dress, your broken English, especially if you don't happen to meet a friend you haven't seen in 20 years?
One thing I want to keep you in mind, you know, that you helped me, and, you know, you helped me with the first step. I guarantee you.
But there are no guarantees for the homeless. Today, Doc is on the streets. Today, Doc is unemployed.
Simply didn't work out for Doc. I hope it does in the months and years to come. There are many problems which confront the homeless, structural problems, almost seemingly intractable problems, and a job simply alone is just not enough. That is especially true of the largest and fastest growing category among the homeless, women and children. That story on tomorrow. But as for tonight, and more appropriately last night, we gave you a telephone number that a great many people called. Over 400 people called, as a matter of fact, at the Homeless Task Force of Atlanta. These are people who simply want to help, and that phone line is open this evening. The telephone number is 872-3603, 872-3603. It's a cold night in Atlanta, and you may want to share some warmth by giving those folks a call. Monica, Terry?
Ron, we all got kind of involved with your friend Doc there. Did you say Doc was unable to keep his job at the trucking firm?
Was unable to keep the job.
Okay, that's a sad story. Thank you very much, Rod.
Tonight in our special assignment, No Place Like Home, a look at who the homeless in Atlanta really are. They are not just the men in torn and faded clothing whose pictures have become a familiar sight.
But they are the fastest growing group among the homeless in Metro Atlanta. Ron Saylor has more from the Phyllis Wheatley Shelter for Women and Children in Southwest Atlanta. Ron?
Terry, I should mention that Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young joins me in tonight's report. As you know, he spent more than a day and a half with me on the streets of Atlanta. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and this new picture of the homeless in Atlanta is probably the most tragic and avoidable picture yet. Most of the people in this new picture are eligible for a wide range of services from the city, from the county, from the state, but somehow they have managed to slip through the social safety net. They are younger and more employable than their traditional counterparts. They spend less time on the streets of Atlanta, but they are on the streets of Atlanta nonetheless.
This is the new portrait of homelessness in Atlanta.
There's a lady that goes up and down the street in the last couple of weeks, and she doesn't bother anybody, and she sleeps out because she carried a little pillar.
And there is this.
I got the call, we have a wife and 4 children sleeping in an old car, and we can't have that in Atlanta. Now, what are they? Are they street people? Are they homeless people?
And there is this.
We've got as much as $1,000 to relocate people from the county government, but you've got to be in a shelter first. So we're seeing people that are moving out of awful housing into shelter to get back into the...
To get back into one of the nearly 1,200 vacant units in Atlanta Housing Authority projects. But most of the people in this new portrait of homelessness are not here, but here.
Y'all got a little extra breakfast?
It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Andy Young and I arrive at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA Shelter for Women and Children. It is one of only 9 such shelters in the city. The women, black and white, the school-aged children, veritable nomads. For some, this is their second or third shelter. And for Lola Thompson's son, Gerald, he is getting ready to go to the 3rd school he's attended this year. From shelter to shelter means from school to school.
And I went down there, downtown down there, twice to get a emergency apartment. They said it wasn't no emergency apartment, that you was in a shelter. So now I'm in a shelter, and now I'm going to see what these people's going to do.
Like most of the women who live in this shelter, Lola Thompson had another option. She could have remained in a one-bedroom apartment with no heat or electricity, or choose to come here. This police van will take these women to what's called a day shelter. Some will offer job training, limited daycare, and counseling. Most will offer only a dry, safe, and sanitary space. It's not much, but given the extremely limited budgets which finance these centers, it is the state-of-the-art for housing homeless women. As you soon discover, life in Atlanta for most of these women and their children is a daily round trip, which leads from shelter to shelter and nowhere to nowhere.
I don't have any money, like to catch the bus to look for a job. So the only thing I can do is go there and do little odd jobs and get 2 tokens in order to get me back here.
They could be in places where they could be learning job skills if they're mentally ill, where they could be getting the mental health services they need. A lot of homeless people work, they just don't have inexpensive places to live.
Reverend Joanna Adams is assistant pastor of the Central Presbyterian Church, which runs one of Atlanta's largest shelters for women and men.
I am absolutely would agree with anybody who would say Joanna, shelters and soup kitchens aren't the answer. I would say, preach it, brother. I agree. But you just can't walk by and say, hey, you starve, or you become a frozen corpse, which is what we had 17 of in our city.
The 17th death occurred within blocks of the Phyllis Wheatley shelter. The 17th death was a woman, a dubious first for the city.
A lady froze to death right over here on Sunset.
When?
About last week. It was cold.
In some ironic and tragic sense, the cold may be one of the surest allies of the homeless in this city. When it gets cold, shelters strain themselves to capacity. Locked doors open a bit sooner than scheduled, and the prospect of women and children having to endure the cold seems to quicken the process of help. But all of that is painstakingly slow.
All of a sudden, because of Underground Atlanta, there's an enormous interest in doing something about the homeless, but we're doing it under the rubric of public safety. This is not a public safety issue. Homeless people don't hurt anybody. They get hurt.
Now, I should update those figures mentioned by Reverend Joanna Adams on the deaths of the homeless. That actual figure now stands at 40. How does the city of Atlanta propose to help the homeless? There are a number of very many good and ingenious proposals. In tomorrow's report, I'm going to tell you how many of those proposals are being actually implemented. Now, I should quickly tell you that there's a telephone number available tonight until 9 o'clock this evening for those of you who want to help. The telephone number is 872-3603, 872-3603. I don't want to make this a telethon. I think this issue kind of stands on its own merit. But we got a number of calls today, including a call from an Atlanta businessman who gave $1,000 to the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA with a promise from another Atlanta businessman for a check of $1,000 tomorrow. So Atlantans are calling and Atlantans are giving. Monica, Terry?
Okay, Ron, thank you very much.
There are 8,000 men, women, and children who live on the streets of Metro Atlanta. Some have lived on the streets for just a matter of weeks, others for years.
Well, whether it's weeks or years, they all face a common problem: how to find a home. In a special assignment, No Place Like Home, Ron Saylor takes a look at that question. Ron is live right now from what's called the Homeless Hotel in downtown Atlanta. Ron?
Terry, this may look like an abandoned, boarded-up building. It is not. In fact, it is home every night of the year, 365 nights a year, to 20 or 25 men who call this place home. Sometimes they refer to it as a cat hole. It actually is the old Imperial Hotel in downtown Atlanta. It's dirty, it's rat-infested, and they run the risk of going to jail for trespassing by coming here, but they come here nonetheless because it's home. During our time on the streets, Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young and I visited the Imperial Hotel and a great many other places. What we found is many different types of people. who may be forced to live in places like this for many years to come. Now, I should warn you, there's language contained in our report tonight which you may find objectionable.
7:30. No, they didn't tell me that last night. Well, my first night, they didn't let me in at no 7:30. They let me in after 8 o'clock. And so I just came back the same time I came in.
Well, you have to be here by 7:30.
I got it.
You have to be here by 7:30.
Wednesday night, along with a few other men, I find out that all the shelter space for this cold evening at least is gone. But I find out something else as well. The images we have stored up about the homeless in Atlanta, even the most stereotypical, have some basis in fact. There are, for instance, some angry and violent men who populate the streets.
Goddamn, I stood out here and froze. They said you got to stay out here till 9 o'clock. Now he gonna tell me when I got a ticket, I got to be here itself.
For nearly an hour he raged at himself, at those inside.
I said, tell somebody. I didn't ask you to. Okay, well, that's the only thing I asked you to do, old smart-ass nigga. I put my raise on there when I get in there.
But for every frightening figure you meet on the street or in a shelter, you meet 20 or 30 who are quote-unquote confused.
See, God has promised me some money coming. So until then, what I'm doing just wait for him to go on and just give it to me the way that I think that I need it.
And there are those who seem physically and mentally adjusted, but whose will not to just survive, but prosper beyond street corners and night shelters, seem virtually annihilated.
You get up in the morning, if you ain't got 50 cents in your pocket and you get up in the morning, where can you go? Most people here walk downtown to try to get work just for that day. If they didn't walk down there and they ain't got the transportation money to go else places, what could they do? Except be stuck in a bind, go from one church to another.
So sleep one night in a shelter, volunteer one night in a shelter kitchen, and you will meet a variety of folks. A mixture whose diverse elements make any common solution elusive.
And some of them have gotten to the point where it's no longer important. You know, having a job is no longer important. Maybe their own dignity is no longer as important to them.
And such are the services essential for maintaining independent living.
These are some of Atlanta's best-known advocates for the homeless.
One group is a group of people that are capable and willing and desireful of becoming independent and getting in a home and having a life. Then there's another group of street people that do not wish to change their lifestyle.
Catherine Bevins from Harvest House, Martha Johnson from the Women's Mission, Anita Beatty from the Homeless Task Force, and others. I invited myself to this supposedly private meeting. The subject, how to help the homeless beyond handouts and giveaways.
Not how much we're going to do for them, but how much we can get these people to do for themselves. And that's where I'm at now. It's how much they can do for themselves. Because if you allow them, every last one will get paid and they'll go out and spend it.
It seems an uncharitable view, unless you know Alice Browner. No cynic, just a realist who believes before any community can help its homeless, it must first understand who they are. If Alice Browner seems uncharitable and unforgiving, try talking to some others who see and work for the homeless daily.
You know, it's one thing for people to talk and talk and talk. It's another thing for, like, we as paramedics to pick them up. We pick up the same folks all the time, and they've urinated on themselves. They're, like, so drunk and disgusting, you don't even want to touch them, but we do it.
All of them are not, some of them are drunk because that's one way to keep warm. And the other thing about it is usually people will give you liquor before they give you food. Isn't it sad?
Reverend McKinley Young operates one of the many food programs for the homeless in the city. Like Bill Satterwhite, who runs the Atlanta Union Mission, there is consensus. Thousands among the homeless are mentally ill, dumped out of mental institutions during the past decade in the name of mental health reform. Now their odyssey has gone full cycle.
I do think we're going to have to go back to institutionalizing some people. And I don't want just to have another central state hospital where we just put them in there like cattle. I don't want that, of course. But I think we're going to have to provide some places for our mentally ill people.
The road home, then, for some at least, may be a return to institutional treatment. Community-based, but institutional nonetheless. Then there are others who walk and live in quiet desperation. They need what amounts to a grub stake. The road home for them is job skill programs, transitional low-income housing, and partnerships between government and private business to hire them. But this road is paved with dollars, and ironically, the most significant dollar expenditure to deal with the homeless in Atlanta is slated for the proposed safeguard zone, $2.5 million, the bulk of which will be used to hire 100 new police officers to step up enforcement against loitering and panhandling in downtown Atlanta.
What could you do for the homeless in Atlanta if you had $2.5 million to spend?
It's just ain't no telling what we could do. We could get homeless people off our streets is what we could do, and instead of having them sit in the jail of all the ridiculous, expensive places for them to be, not to mention terrible places for them to be, they could be in places where they could be learning job skills if they're mentally ill, where they could be getting the mental health services they need.
But the architects of the proposed safeguard zone call their proposal only the first step in an eventual process that will not only aid the city's image, but aid the homeless as well. That, they say, deserves support, not condemnation. I found in walking these streets and sitting in public parks that there is another potential solution, one easily convenient. Just ignore these people and hope they will go away. It may seem laughable, but many will argue that for years, Atlanta, the state, and the federal government have done essentially that. It just doesn't work anymore, because they will no longer be ignored.
Now, I should quickly mention two things. First of all, I hope you were quick enough to catch it. The man standing outside Central Presbyterian Church was raging to someone inside. The man in the brown coat sitting off to his left was Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young. I wanted you to see just how close Andy Young came to the thousands of the homeless who live in the city of Atlanta. Tomorrow in our report, I'm going to tell you what it feels like to be homeless in your own hometown. I found that out firsthand when nobody knows your name. Now, there's a telephone number that's available tonight for those of you who want to help the homeless in Atlanta. The telephone number is 872-3603, 872-3603. There are only 4 lines and 4 people manning those phones, so they may be busy. Keep trying to call. They'll be there till 9 o'clock tonight. I'm told the people at the Homeless Task Force need your help. I'm sure you'll call. Monica, Terry?
Thank you very much, Ron, for this really moving series.
You know, for the past 4 nights in his special assignment, No Place Like Home, Ron Saylor has painted a portrait of homelessness in Metro Atlanta, and it has not been a pretty picture.
Tonight he turns the brush inward at himself. Masquerading as a homeless man on the streets of Atlanta for nearly a week changed some of his perceptions and challenged some of his preconceived notions. Ron is here with us now to complete his series. Ron.
First, if I can, let me try to set up tonight's story. Imagine, if you can, being homeless in a town where many people know your name and your face, but suddenly there is a nearly impenetrable wall which separates you from the familiar. Imagine having to resort to panhandling, a fancy name for begging in public in order to survive. Imagine being avoided on the basis of sight alone. Now, imagine this. The homeless don't have to imagine any of this. It is a day-to-day reality.
You can make the earnest attempt to get closer than close to homelessness in Atlanta, but no matter how skilled the makeup artist, no matter how vivid and jarring the few moments of sleep and the many moments of walking into the cold night, you cannot begin to comprehend the enormous physical and psychological toll of being without a home. To be homeless is to be sometimes friendless, oftentimes feared. You cannot synthesize that feeling in a month of weeks. I'm convinced it is to be invisible. It has been a week of surrealistic play acting, but there is no play acting in the eyes and attitudes of many I've met on the streets of Atlanta. Instead, there's genuine and authentic hostility.
Excuse me, mister, could I borrow a quarter from you?
Excuse me, sir, I don't mean to be rude, 'cause I saw you feeding.
I only asked the first time, you know what I mean? You know I won't answer, right?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry,
Just keep walking.
I just want to borrow a quarter from you, mister.
Yeah, you're good, okay.
You ought to be like that.
Well, get your job, that's what you need to do. Younger than I am.
He will feed a pigeon, but he won't feed me. And there are those who've come to know the approach of the homeless, and who with body language, a flick of the hand, can dispatch you away.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. What? Could I...
As Ron Saylor, they might have shook hands. As an obvious vagrant, the hand was a warning to me to get back.
Sorry, fellas, that's all I got. Just like some politicians. Eat all you get and then they go.
But there is not much humor in homelessness, especially when one considers how few options the homeless have. My $10.50 is about gone, and with it, most of my options.
It's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and it just dawned on me that I've got about 35, 36 cents left, and that's all that stands between me and being flat broke. It's also my only connection to a possible place to sleep tonight, and so I've got to use 25 cents of that 35 cents and hope that the answer at the other end of the phone is yes, come on down and we can help you. Otherwise, this bench tonight is going to be a bed.
But by tomorrow morning, it will be a fading memory. But not so for thousands who sleep in parking decks when the cars no longer come to park. The thousands who eat what others throw away, who sit in a community of quiet isolation, who live in the littered landscapes of what little life they can eke from the city. To think I was tentative in my approach to these people, as though they might hurt me at worst or infect me at best. What a slap into painful reality. These are victims. Victims of government policy which dumped thousands of the mentally ill into the community but provided no community of care and concern to meet them. Victims of broken homes who found the hell of homelessness preferable to the hell and horror of what masqueraded as homes. Victims of a kind of self-mutilation, whether drugs or alcohol or low ceilings of ambition. But in a week, perhaps even in a few hours, you come to know that these are not the many parts of a collage of criminals. These are victims.
If this experience has taught anything, it has made clear the extent of homelessness in Atlanta. It is no aberration. It is no media hype or TV speak. It's real men and women and children who live a real reality of street shelters, soup kitchens, handouts, and giveaways. As I've shown you this week, some of these people can help themselves, and they should. We don't want to institutionalize the problem of homelessness in Atlanta, but we need enough institutions to separate and then care for those thousands of homeless people who require the care of any civilized community. The city cannot do it alone. The state has to play a role. Private enterprise must continue to play a valuable role. I should also mention that my role of being homeless for a week is over, but for thousands, it continues. Monica,
Ron, I've got to tell you, that's one of the most thought-provoking news series I've ever seen.
Thank you. Can I thank Marcus Snipes, the photographer who shot this?
Excellent. And who was your editor?
Marcus Snipes, Les Montgomery, Emily Pierce. A lot of people work very hard on it.
Very well done.
Amazing series.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.